The rain poured relentlessly that evening, drumming against the windows like an urgent whisper. Inside a grand but strangely hollow house, he sat across from her, his new wife. Their marriage wasn't built on love, nor even friendship. It was an agreement, a solution to two separate problems. He needed stability, an escape from the mounting pressure of his family's expectations. She needed security, a place to rebuild her life after everything she had lost. It was simple, or at least that's what they told themselves. The silence between them felt heavier than the storm outside. He stole a glance at her, calm, composed, almost distant. She wasn't like the women he had known before, the ones who fawned over him, eager for his attention. No, she was different. She held herself with quiet strength, her eyes revealing nothing. He told himself he didn't care. This wasn't about feelings. Love had no place in an arrangement like this. Days passed, and they settled into a routine. Mornings were polite exchanges over coffee, brief nods before they went their separate ways. Evenings were quiet, filled with the unspoken understanding that they were merely two people sharing a space, nothing more. He was certain it would always be this way until, without realizing it, he started noticing things. The way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear when she was thinking. The soft hum of a melody she carried while cooking. The way her presence made the house feel less empty. One night, he came home late, expecting the usual silence. But as he stepped inside, something felt different. A warm glow flickered in the living room, and there she was, curled up on the couch, fast asleep. A book rested on her lap, her breathing steady. For a reason he couldn't quite explain, he didn't walk away. He stood there watching her, an unfamiliar ache settling in his chest. He could have woken her, reminded her that this wasn't real, that they were nothing more than two people fulfilling an agreement. Instead, he grabbed a blanket, carefully draped it over her, and sat down nearby. It was a small moment, one she would never know about. But for him, it was the first crack in the walls he had built around himself. Little did he know, the woman he had married out of convenience was about to become the one thing he never expected, his everything. That night, something shifted, though neither of them spoke about it. She woke up at some point, blinking in confusion as she realized she was covered with a blanket she didn't remember pulling over herself. He was still sitting nearby, his head slightly turned away, pretending to be lost in thought. She hesitated for a second before pulling the blanket tighter around her and murmuring a quiet, "Thanks." He only nodded, not meeting her gaze. The next morning, nothing had changed, or at least, that's what they both pretended. They fell back into their routine of quiet meals, passing conversations, and carefully drawn boundaries. But something was different now. He caught himself looking at her when she wasn't paying attention, watching the way she absent-mindedly traced the rim of her coffee cup, the way her brows furrowed slightly when she was lost in thought. And sometimes, when he wasn't expecting it, she would look at him too, just for a second, as if she was trying to figure something out. They had never really talked about why they agreed to this marriage. Sure, the reasons were clear on paper. He needed to silence his family's growing concern about his unstable lifestyle. And she needed security, a chance to start over. It was logical, practical. No strings attached. But now, in the quiet moments between them, he wondered if there was more to her story than she had let on. One evening, as they sat in the living room, her reading, him scrolling through his phone, he finally asked, "Why did you really agree to this?" She didn't look up. "I already told you." "No?" He leaned back, watching her. "That's what you wanted me to believe. But that's not the whole truth, is it?" Her fingers tightened slightly around the book. She didn't answer right away, and for a second, he thought she might just ignore him completely. But then, she sighed. "It doesn't matter." He frowned. "It does." She finally looked at him, something unreadable in her expression. "Why do you care?" He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. He didn't know. He wasn't supposed to care. She must have seen something in his face, because she gave a small, almost sad smile before looking away again. "People don't always get to choose the life they want," she said softly. "Sometimes, they just have to survive the one they're given." Something in her voice made his chest tighten. He wanted to ask more, but he knew better than to push. So instead, he just sat there, feeling the weight of her words settle between them. Days turned into weeks. They still lived in the same house, still kept up the illusion of a normal marriage. But he started noticing more things: the way she sometimes tensed up when her phone buzzed, the way she locked the doors twice at night, the way she seemed to always be waiting for something or someone that never came. One night, he heard her in the kitchen long after midnight. When he walked in, he found her sitting at the counter, staring at an untouched glass of water. "You okay?" he asked. She startled slightly, like she hadn't even heard him come in. Then, after a pause, she nodded. "Yeah. Just couldn't sleep." He leaned against the counter, studying her. "Bad dreams?" She hesitated. "Something like that." He didn't press. Instead, he pulled open a cupboard and grabbed 2 mugs. "Tea?" She glanced at him, surprised, but nodded. He made the tea in silence, handing her a cup before sitting down across from her. They didn't talk, but for the first time, the silence between them didn't feel empty. After that night, something changed again. She started trusting him just a little. And he started realizing that he wanted to know her, really know her. But trust wasn't something easily given, and whatever ghost she carried, they weren't ready to leave her yet. Then one evening, everything shifted. He was coming home late from work when he noticed a black car parked down the street. It wasn't unusual to see cars in their neighborhood, but something about this one made him uneasy. The way it was just sitting there, lights off, engine running. When he stepped inside the house, she was in the kitchen, washing dishes. She turned at the sound of the door closing, offering him a small nod. But something was off. "You okay?" he asked. She hesitated. "Yeah, just tired." But he saw it, the slight tremble in her hands, the way she kept glancing toward the window. He followed her gaze, his stomach tightening. "That car outside. Do you know who it is?" Her grip on the dish tightened just slightly. "I don't know." He didn't believe her. And for the first time since this marriage began, he realized something he should have seen all along. She wasn't just looking for security. She was running from something, or someone. And whoever it was, they had just found her. He didn't sleep that night. Neither did she. She tried to act normal, moving around the house as if nothing had changed, but he could see it, the way she kept glancing at the window, the way her shoulders tensed at the smallest sound. The black car was gone when he checked, but that didn't make him feel any better. When she finally went to bed, he stayed up. He sat in the dimly lit living room, fingers tapping restlessly against his knee. He had never asked too many questions before. Their arrangement was built on unspoken rules, no personal matters, no unnecessary conversations. But now, those rules felt meaningless. She was scared, and he wanted to know why. The next morning, he found her standing by the kitchen counter, a cup of coffee in her hands. She looked like she hadn't slept either. "You need to tell me what's going on," he said. She didn't look at him. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing." His voice was firmer than he intended. "I saw how you reacted last night. Who are you running from?" She exhaled slowly, staring down at the dark liquid in her cup. For a long moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. But then, "There was a man," she said quietly. "A long time ago." His jaw tightened. "What kind of man?" She gave a small, bitter smile. "The kind you don't say no to." His stomach sank. He didn't need to hear the details to understand what she meant. "I left," she continued. "I thought I was safe." She finally looked at him, and for the first time since their marriage began, he saw real fear in her eyes. But no one ever really escapes him. He felt something cold settle in his chest. He didn't know why, but the thought of someone like that being anywhere near her made his hands curl into fists. "Does he know where you are?" he asked. She hesitated. "I don't know." That wasn't good enough. For the next few days, he was more cautious. He checked the windows at night, kept an eye on the street, paid attention to anything that felt out of place. She didn't say much, but he knew she noticed. The distance between them was still there, but something had shifted. He wasn't just the man she had married for convenience anymore. And that terrified him more than anything. One evening, he came home to find her in the living room, staring at her phone. When she noticed him, she quickly locked the screen and placed it face down on the table. "What is it?" he asked. She shook her head. "Nothing." He walked over, reaching for the phone before she could stop him. When he flipped it over, his chest tightened. One new message. No name. Just a number. "Found you." His grip on the phone tightened. He looked at her, his pulse pounding. "You need to tell me everything. Now?" She swallowed hard, her expression unreadable. Then, after a long pause, she whispered, "It's already too late." At that moment, the sound of a car pulling up outside made both of them freeze. The engine outside rumbled low and steady, its presence pressing against the silence of the house. Neither of them moved. She was still staring at him, her breath uneven, her hands curled into fists at her sides. He could see it, the sheer terror in her eyes, the kind that only came when someone knew exactly what was waiting for them on the other side of the door. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Go to the bedroom. Lock the door." She didn't argue. She just turned and disappeared down the hall, her footsteps nearly soundless. He stood there for a second, his mind racing. Then he moved. He reached for the nearest drawer, fingers wrapping around the cold metal of the object he had never thought he'd need. He wasn't the kind of man who prepared for danger, but something told him he should have been. His heart pounded as he moved toward the front door, every sense alert. A shadow shifted outside, then 3 sharp knocks. He didn't answer. Instead, he positioned himself just to the side, where he could see without being seen. The figure on the other side wasn't moving, but he knew whoever it was, they weren't leaving. The phone in his pocket vibrated. He pulled it out, his pulse spiking when he saw the message. "Open the door." No name, no number. But he knew. His fingers tightened around the handle. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, thick and suffocating. He had no idea what he was walking into. All he knew was that the woman behind that locked door down the hall had run for a reason. And now, her past had come knocking. Another knock. Louder this time. He exhaled, bracing himself, and finally reached for the lock. The door creaked open, just enough for him to see the man standing on the other side. Tall, dressed in black, eyes sharp and unreadable. "I was wondering when we'd meet," the man said, his voice smooth, controlled. He didn't respond. He just stood there, blocking the doorway. The man tilted his head slightly. "You know why I'm here." His grip on the door tightened. "I know you're not welcome." A slow, amused smile. "That's not really your decision, is it?" A pause. A shift in the air, heavy with unspoken threats. Then finally, the man's smile faded. "Tell her it's time to come home." His chest tightened. He didn't look away. "She's not going anywhere." For the first time, something flickered in the man's expression, something dark, something final. "We'll see about that." And then, just like that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. He shut the door, locking it, pressing his back against the wood as he let out a slow breath. His hands were shaking. Down the hall, he heard the quiet sound of a door unlocking. She stepped out, eyes wide, searching his face. Who was it? He didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, really looked at her. And in that moment, He knew whatever happened next, he wasn't letting her go. She stood in the dim hallway, waiting for an answer, but he wasn't sure how to give her one. The man's words were still ringing in his ears. Tell her it's time to come home. He knew what that meant. This wasn't over. It wasn't even close. She took a hesitant step closer, studying his face. He's not gone, is he? He exhaled slowly, shaking his head. No? Something flickered across her expression, fear, but also something else. Resignation. Like she had known this was coming. Like she had expected it all along. I need you to tell me the truth, he said. All of it. For a second, she looked like she might refuse. But then, she closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and said the words he wasn't ready for. I was never supposed to leave. His stomach tightened. What do you mean? She opened her eyes, and this time, he saw it, the weight of whatever she had been carrying. I didn't just run from him, she said quietly. I took something when I left. He stared at her, his mind struggling to catch up. Took what? She swallowed hard. Something he can't let go of. A sinking feeling settled in his chest. He had assumed this was about control, about obsession. But it was more than that. This wasn't just personal. It was about something bigger. Before he could ask another question, her phone buzzed on the table. They both turned toward it, neither moving. The screen lit up with a message from the same unknown number. Check your front door. A chill ran down his spine. He moved first, striding toward the door, ignoring the way she whispered his name in warning. His pulse pounded as he unlocked it, hesitating only for a second before pulling it open. Nothing. No one standing outside, no black car waiting in the distance. But when he glanced down, his breath caught. A single photograph lay on the doorstep. He bent down, his fingers brushing the edge as he picked it up. The moment he saw it, everything inside him went still. It was a picture of them, of him and her, taken inside their house. From the angle, the shot had been captured through the living room window. Recently, someone had been watching. He turned sharply, scanning the street, but the night was quiet, undisturbed. Whoever had left it was already gone. When he stepped back inside, she saw the look on his face before he even held up the photo. She pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes widening in horror. They're already here, he said, his voice low. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. Because they both knew whatever she had taken, whatever she was hiding, it had just brought danger straight to their front door. She stood frozen, her breath shallow, eyes locked on the photograph in his hands. He watched as she reached for it, her fingers trembling slightly as she traced the edges. They've been inside, she whispered. His jaw clenched. That was the part that unsettled him the most. Whoever had taken this photo hadn't just been watching from the outside, they had been close enough to see their lives unfold from within. He grabbed his keys. We're leaving. She hesitated. Where? Somewhere safe. But even as he said it, he wasn't sure there was such a place anymore. They packed quickly, throwing essentials into a bag. Every second felt like a countdown to something inevitable. The moment they stepped outside, the night air felt heavier, charged. He kept her close, scanning the street, his every sense on high alert. They reached his car, and he pulled open the door for her. Just as she was about to step inside, a voice rang out from the darkness. I wouldn't do that. His body went rigid. He turned slowly, shielding her behind him. The man from before stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, his expression calm, too calm. But there was something different this time. He wasn't alone. A second figure emerged from the shadows. And when she saw them, all the air left her lungs. No? Her voice barely made a sound. He glanced at her, confused, before turning his attention back to the newcomer. And then he saw it, the resemblance. The familiarity in the way they held themselves. The same sharp gaze. Who is he? He asked, his voice low. She swallowed hard, gripping his arm. My brother. The words hit like a punch to the gut. All this time, he had thought she had been running from one man, but she had been running from her own blood. The brother stepped closer, his expression unreadable. You should known better than to think you could disappear. Her grip on his arm tightened. I had no choice. A slow, humorless smile spread across her brother's face. You always had a choice. You just made the wrong one. The man in black, her brother's associate, spoke up then. Give it back. Silence stretched. He felt her shift behind him, could sense the conflict raging inside her. And then he understood. She still had it. Whatever she had taken, whatever had made them hunt her down, she still had it. His mind raced. They were outnumbered, outmaneuvered. But he wasn't going to let them take her. And then, before anyone could react, she made her choice. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, worn drive. This is what you want, right? She said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Her brother's expression darkened. Hand it over. But she didn't. Instead, she took a step back, then another. And before anyone could stop her, she hurled the drive onto the pavement and stomped on it with all her strength. A sickening crack filled the air. Her brother's face twisted in rage. Do you have any idea what you've just done? She lifted her chin. I do. For a moment, no one moved. Then, in the blink of an eye, everything happened at once. Her brother lunged forward, but he was faster. He stepped in front of her, grabbing her wrist and pulling her back. Tires screeched in the distant sirens. Someone had called them. The men hesitated, their advantage slipping away. Her brother glared at her, his expression unreadable. This isn't over, he said. Then, as quickly as they had appeared, they vanished into the night. She stood there, breathing hard, staring at the shattered remains of the drive. He turned to her, searching her face. You okay? She let out a shaky breath. I am now. The sirens grew louder, but he wasn't thinking about them. He was thinking about her, about what they had just survived, and about the fact that, somehow, in the middle of all this chaos, she had become the one thing he couldn't walk away from. The sirens were getting closer, their sharp wails cutting through the night. He could feel her trembling beside him, though she was trying to hold herself together. The weight of everything that had just happened pressed down on them both, heavy and unrelenting. She had destroyed whatever was on that drive, but it didn't feel like the end. Her brother's last words echoed in his mind. This isn't over. But for now, it was enough. They were still standing. They had survived. When the police arrived, he stepped forward, answering their questions carefully. He kept the details, vague strangers outside their home, feeling threatened, no clear faces. He wasn't sure how much of the truth would make things worse, and she didn't correct him. The officers took their statements, advised them to stay somewhere safe for the night, and eventually left. The house felt different when they walked back inside. It wasn't home anymore. It was a reminder of how easily everything could be taken away. She sat down on the couch, running a hand through her hair. I don't know what happens next. He watched her, studying the exhaustion on her face, the way she stared at the floor, as if she was still somewhere else. A few days ago, he might have let her figure it out on her own. But now, the thought of her walking away of him, letting her go, was unbearable. You don't have to figure it out alone, he said. She looked up at him, something unreadable in her expression. Why are you doing this? Because she wasn't just someone who had come into his life out of convenience anymore. Because somewhere between all the lies, the danger, and the fear, she had become the only thing that mattered. But he couldn't say that. Not yet. Because I want to, he said simply. She held his gaze for a long time, searching for something in his face. Then, finally, she nodded. They left that night. He packed a bag without hesitation, and she did the same. There was nothing left for them in that house, not when it had been invaded by the past she had been trying so hard to escape. They drove for hours, leaving the city behind, neither of them speaking much. The weight of everything still hung between them, too raw to unpack. But there was something in the silence that felt different now. Not tense, not uncertain, just waiting. At some point, exhaustion took over, and she fell asleep against the window. He glanced at her, the soft rise and fall of her breath, the way her hands were curled into loose fists in her lap. For the first time in his life, he realized what it meant to want to protect someone. Not out of obligation, not out of responsibility, but because losing them wasn't an option. By morning, they reached a quiet town miles away from everything they had known. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it was a start. He found them a small place to stay, something off the grid, away from prying eyes. For the first few days, she barely spoke. She would sit by the window, staring out at the unfamiliar streets, lost in thought. He didn't push. He gave her space, knowing that she had spent so long running that stopping felt unnatural. Then one evening, she finally spoke. "I don't know who I am without all of this," she admitted. He turned to her, watching as she traced invisible patterns on the wooden table. "Then maybe it's time to find out." She looked at him, something fragile in her expression. "And what if I don't like who I am?" He leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "Then we figure it out together." For a moment, she didn't say anything. But then, for the first time in what felt like forever, she smiled. It was small, barely there, but it was real. Days turned into weeks. The tension that had once gripped her so tightly began to ease, little by little. She started going on walks in the mornings, breathing in the fresh air like she was learning how to exist again. She laughed more, sometimes without realizing it, and he found himself memorizing those moments. They didn't talk about her brother, or the past, or what came next. Maybe they were both afraid to say it out loud, to acknowledge the possibility that this peace was temporary. But for now, it was enough. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sun dip below the horizon, she turned to him and said, "I used to dream about this." He glanced at her. "About what?" She took a deep breath, as if trying to hold on to the moment. "A life where I wasn't afraid." He didn't say anything at first. Then, without thinking, he reached over and took her hand. She didn't pull away. Instead, she squeezed his fingers gently, grounding herself in the warmth of his touch. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," he said. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and in that moment, he knew she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was finally living. And so was he.